Okay, so our next discussion is entitled Innovations in Digital Infrastructure. Now this panel will dive into the cutting-edge advancements shaping digital energy systems and how they're transforming the energy landscape. And please join me and as I ask our next panel to come to the stage, Tom Mapes, Andrew Weber, Sean Farrell, and Scott Garrison. And as they are being seated, Tom Mapes is the founder and president of USEA's, frankly, our newest member, Digital Energy Council. Tom will moderate the panel. Joining Tom is Andrew Weber, founder and CEO of Digital Power Optimization, Sean Farrell, senior vice president of operations at TeraWulf, and Scott Garrison, the chief operating officer at CleanSpark. Tom's background is he worked at the Department of Energy, and like some in the room, in addition to the executive branch, he also worked on Capitol Hill in the U.S. Senate. So he too brings a perspective of policies both on the legislative side and on the executive branch side. And so with that, Tom, I will turn the panel over to you for introductions of your panel members. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Mark. And can you hear me all right? Thanks, Mark. Thanks, USEA, and thanks for everyone for being here. I'm Tom Mapes. I'm the founder and president of the Digital Energy Council, where our focus is kind of the nexus of the energy industry with digital applications. So a lot of conversation today has been that we need a lot of power, it sounds, to advance our technology in the United States. So our mission and one of our beliefs is that ultimately technology development is going to be built off the backbone of energy. So that's, among other things, what we would like to kind of reiterate here, and would like my panel here to introduce themselves, kind of give some background on your companies, what you guys do. Each of them kind of come at this digital energy, digital infrastructure sector in a different way. So it'll be a real good opportunity for all you to kind of hear what's actually going on the ground right now. So, Andrew.
Thanks, Tom. I'm Andrew Weber, the founder of a company called Digital Power Optimization. I started my career in investment banking at Goldman Sachs in New York. I moved off to the buy side, worked a number of years at hedge funds, private equity firms, Fortress Investment Group, among others. And got involved in this intersection of energy and computing really in 2019, early 2020, and that's when DPO was founded. The idea behind our company is that there's actually a lot of stranded power in this country. There's a lot of assets that are underutilized, stranded electrons, undervalued electrons. There's a lot of power that's sold at a negative price. And we felt that data centers actually make a great off-taker for stranded power at locations where you might normally not have built a data center. So for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been running around the energy sector, utilities, IPPs, renewable developers, and explaining that they can develop these sort of footprints co-located with their generation assets so that you avoid a lot of the transmission problems that are being faced by larger data center developments. So again, we've proposed that in many cases, these projects are built by third-party capital that comes in to fund that project. In some cases, the energy companies themselves might actually balance sheet some of these developments because they're interested in creating this very highly valuable off-taker for their power. And so again, our mechanism is one where we create partnership with energy companies rather than trying to treat them like a counterparty. And ultimately, our goal is to help them make more money for themselves using the assets that they already own or control.
Thanks. Sean?
Yeah, so I work for TeraWulf. TeraWulf was formed on the backbone of 2 decades of energy experience across the different parts of the infrastructure. My background was with Siemens Energy and Siemens Gamesa. I was there for 13 years through different aspects of the energy chain, and I joined TeraWulf in June of 2022. We're an ESG-focused digital infrastructure company, and we're changing the way that data centers are kind of located throughout the US as well as outside the US. If you look 5-10 years ago, most of your data centers were all stacked in Ashburn, Virginia, as close to the fiber IXPs as physically possible. We're doing it slightly different. As a lot of the data centers went from your FedEx, your American Express, your Visa that needs super low latency, we're using our energy backgrounds to really focus on finding the areas that Andrew just mentioned that have energy abundancy, and we're co-locating data centers closer to where the energy is and bringing the fiber and the water to those locations to actually build the data. When you go into AI HPC, you don't need the 3, 4, 5 millisecond latency. You can start getting the double digits, and that really opens up to where you can build some of these data centers, again, both in the US and outside. TeraWulf did start as a Bitcoin miner back in 2021. We, on the private side, we still have a power plant in Montana that we run. It's a 95 megawatt power plant that is co-located to a data center. And we started monetizing Bitcoin with a company called Marathon back in 2021. We formed TeraWulf from that venture, and we leveraged existing generation assets. One of the assets that we, kind of our jewel, is in upstate New York near Buffalo. That was a 700 megawatt coal plant. We ran that coal plant for 5 years before TeraWulf. Shut down that coal plant in 2020. We repurposed that interconnection. We have 250 megawatts of Bitcoin mining at that facility now, and a roadmap to build 500 megawatts of AI and HPC infrastructure. From a Bitcoin mining perspective, we build the data centers, own all the ASICs inside that data center, fully vertically integrated. From an AI HPC perspective, we're building 72 megawatts of data center right now. And towards the rest of this panel, I can get into kind of how the data centers have changed and the cost allocation of those data centers are rapidly changing. But for the data centers, we build the infrastructure all the way down to the low voltage connection. Companies like Microsoft and other large hyperscalers or enterprise data companies will come in and they'll bring their server racks, their GPUs, and their compute, co-locate those in our data centers, and they'll sign like a 10, 15-year long-term lease.
Thanks, John. Scott?
Scott Garrison, COO of CleanSpark, and it's very interesting to hear both of you because I think 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you might see 3 20-year-olds sitting up here. And obviously I'm a lot older than that, so I don't want to go into everything I've done in my life, but I started as a golf pro, and I learned a lot about technology and then got in Silicon Valley. And recently with CleanSpark started was an energy company out west for microgrids for the military. And we got a call from in Georgia where our CEO, Zach Bradford, went out and we bought a data center. And I believe that was 4 years ago. We got into Bitcoin mining, and a lot of people that you've grown up in the industry and looked at different things. I called my son in college and asked Briggs, said, what do you know about Bitcoin? Where's it going? But I wanted to see our model. One of the things Zach is very confident is we basically bought all our sites in Georgia to start. We're in rural Georgia, and what really is interesting to me is the difference we make in rural Georgia. And we continued to buy that. When I first moved to Georgia was 3 years ago. We had 2 sites. Today we have 26 sites. We started with 70 megawatts. We're pushing over 700 megawatts, and we have 200 in construction today. The difference a lot with CleanSpark, we own the dirt, we own every server in the building. We are a pure play Bitcoin miner. But with that, where that comes, in many of our utilities, I can shut the power off and give it back at any time. So when people really made me understand this was in Georgia, when one of the CEOs came up and said, Scott, you're a resource to us at all times because we're building infrastructure for small rural Georgia towns. So some of the stories we have of kids working for us or going in is really fun for me. And to see what we've done in these cities where budgets are very small. So for example, Sandersville, Georgia, pushing 10,000 people, 22 megawatts that they run the city. They run a Kalen mine, and Trojan Batteries is there. We are now in contributions to that town monthly over 500,000 to 600,000 a month. We've changed these rural towns for these people, and it's a lot of fun for me to meet with the mayors and doing that from coming out west. So I've fallen in love with the South. I've fallen in love with Georgia. I live there full time now. And we are moving in right now, building 100 megawatts in Cheyenne. We are in Tennessee and building out there. So we're very excited. And it really is fun to be on a panel. And Tom, thank you. Because I think the industry gets a bad rap. And the more I learned about it and the more we bring people in, it is changed a lot, and the stories, I think, need to be told of what you say competitors, but we're really not competitors. We're really teammates trying to present that out to everyone and help the grid.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. And part of the reason I want them each to give background to you, we've talked a lot today about data centers, AI, and we're using this kind of broad language to kind of try to get to this, this generation demand issue. And it's kind of more nuanced than that. And the three of these don't fit into that hyperscaler size that we've talked about a lot today, purchasing gigawatts, et cetera. But wanted each of you to, you guys all touched on it, but wanted each of you to kind of, explain what your size is, where you're located, and to kind of get an idea that, we need new technologies, different, as the world becomes more digitized, we're going to come to new technologies to kind of help solve this problem, which is our energy infrastructure, our grids, our, as mentioned, generation, demand, et cetera. But kind of wrapping heads around, there are more pieces to this puzzle than just data centers, AI, and figure that out. But wanted each of you to kind of, you touch on it a little bit, but give a little background on your size, where you're located, what you're working on.
Sure. So we typically look at smaller developments. We're not looking to compete with Microsoft to build 500 megawatts of data center all at the same time. Frankly, we think that's very, very hard, and it takes a very long time to find those sites, and they're rather limited. We have taken the idea of building, 50 megawatts, 70 megawatts, maybe 18 megawatts, depending on what excess power capacity exists at the generation asset we're talking about. So we speak with companies that have, one of our largest partners is 80 gigawatts of owned generation. It's a big company. Within that 80 gigawatts, a lot of it's contracted, a lot of it's already obligated elsewhere, but they've got a lot of stranded power in, sizes ranging from 10 megawatts here up to 50, 60, 80 over there. And again, the idea of going and using these wind assets or using a solar asset, using the substation that's already there, saves a lot of time and energy and upfront CapEx costs to develop these projects. So DPO, again, we typically start off with pilot operations, but we've done data centers behind the meter on wind, behind the meter on solar, behind the meter on hydro, done one behind the meter on natural gas. We've done them on the grid. I've done them in PJM, in MISO, in ERCOT. We also own our own hydro assets in Wisconsin. So we have a small hydro there and another one in the south central US. I think one is 6 megawatts nameplate, the other one's 12. So these are relatively modest developments, but that's kind of the point of our business is we can flow like water into the cracks in or around the energy sector and make use of assets that are otherwise undervalued, underutilized, people selling power for minus 20. Don't do that. I'll help you make, at least 10, 20, 30 bucks out of that. So again, our view is size isn't the only deciding factor. And in fact, the most efficient developments, the lowest cost power, may be in smaller sizes, more distributed, in smaller footprints all over the country, rather than in these big mega developments. So I'm happy to let Google and Microsoft go do their giant stuff. We're going to fill in, in and around where we can. And again, ideally using existing infrastructure.
Great.
Yes, I'll first start off with not all sites are created equal. You'll hear, and I think, to Scott's point, a lot of Bitcoin miners have gotten the bad rap. Like, oh yeah, my Bitcoin mining site's going to be an AI site. That is the biggest fallacy possible. To put it in perspective, a Bitcoin mining site costs you $500 a kW to build. An AI site, you're $6 to $12 million a megawatt, depending on the UPSs, backups, recips, that kind of stuff you do for power redundancy. So first off, when we talk about capacity, there's some that can do both, but there's some that absolutely cannot do both. I kind of smiled when Tom asked about capacity as we're diversifying in the AI space. We first built a 2 megawatt proof of concept for AI. And then I can't say names, but we had some people come in and say they want 500, 750 megawatts of capacity. And we're sitting there like this little 2 megawatt, 40 rack server room, like, okay, we might need to rethink the value and the strategy of us going forward. So to answer Tom's question directly, we have 1 gigawatt of energy capacity that's right now under the portfolio. That is after our recent exit. So we were behind the meter with Talon at Susquehanna Nuclear in Pennsylvania. That was a 206 megawatt Bitcoin mining center. We were 25%, so we had 50 megawatts there. And the parties had ability to go an additional 100 megawatts. Amazon came in and bought that site. That's the Cumulus site that you probably see in the news. And we had a fantastic offer to exit that facility. We had I think it was a 3.4x multiple to exit. And that allowed us to double down on the 1 gigawatt of assets that we have in New York, because just the OpEx, the energy cost, whereby at Niagara Falls, is considerably lower in New York versus the Pennsylvania with some of the operational costs we had there. To further Tom's question, I don't know how to say this politically correct, but we're looking for the dirty sites that we can redevelop. And when I say dirty sites, our background of energy infrastructure, I have a full EHS team, environmental health and safety, that focuses on cleaning up sites if we purchase a site like an old coal plant. So right now, we're heavily looking at coal plants, pulp and paper, and steel plants across the US and also outside the US. A lot of those that were built 30, 40 years ago, you have that two-end power redundancy going to those facilities. They were over-engineered, they were built bulletproof, and those sites are perfect for those sites that do qualify for Bitcoin and AI HPC. So that's kind of how we're looking to grow our portfolio. Again, 1 gigawatt now under both the private and the public side, and we got about 5 gigawatts of assets that we're looking at both in the US and outside. I mean, I'm going to Central America next week, so we're really looking to branch out outside of the United States.
Yeah, and Scott, how about you all?
I think it was a
CleanSpark?
great explanation about what people think, that a lot of Bitcoin miners, like, we'll just turn our sites into AI. You explained it. It's not going to happen, right? CleanSpark is focused. We have 707 megawatts today running of Bitcoin mining as we speak. We're building 200, and we have another 400 we have under contract through acquisitions that have been announced. We're hyper-focused on mining Bitcoin. We understand it, we own it, we do it ourselves, and we can move forward. I agree about the smaller sites. There's so much stranded power we look at, and when you go to these new substations, I was involved with Microsoft for many years when they opened Azure up and brought it on. These data centers will take 5 years, 4 to 5 years to build. They'll build a 100 megawatt system, and they're still not filled up in some areas that we're in. We'll come in, any of us will come in 6 to 9 months, we'll be up and running 100% of 100 megawatts. Matter of fact, one of the electric companies basically had to timestamp pictures to show them what we did in Georgia on a 150 megawatt site, from when we started to when we turned it on. And when we turned that 150 megawatt site on, I turned it on in 4 days. So people couldn't grasp that in that. But now where they're getting, and I'm meeting with utilities all over the country, is saying, guys, you're building these substations, and they build them, but they can't even, they can't use that power for 4 years. Well, I can sit there for 2 to 3 years, create revenue for your town and your state, and then we can move on to other places. And I think what you're saying is there's a plenty of areas that have stranded power. So we're looking at the above. We have a big site. I have a lot of 5 megawatt sites, 10 megawatt sites. I have a 235 megawatt site. But as we go around the country, where does it help? We have a saying at CleanSpark, we come through the front door. Whenever I go into town, I go straight to the mayor's office and explain to what we do and how we do it, and do you want us here? And once they understand it and see it, we haven't been turned down. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to work together. And that's, I think, why we all work together now instead of hiding or getting behind it, to really have people like yourselves understand what we're doing.
And Scott, that kind of leads me into my next point, and you kind of answered that on behalf of your organization. But Sean, Andrew, if you want to kind of give some background, and obviously we're here with stakeholders, regulators, policymakers, et cetera. Kind of what do you find working for you out there as you're building? What's kind of the quick summary of a process or such building out, or kind of leading through this whole site development?
Yeah, it's a loaded question.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair.
So, to Scott's point, the reason why we look at these, we call them brown assets, is because the interconnects aren't there. So you can jump ahead in the interconnection process. A lot of those transmission lines that are going to the site are already built. You still have to go through the queue for a load being on the grid, but again, it fast tracks that process. The problem that we're seeing now, like, we have an interconnection position. I know NISO, I think, speaking after us. We have an interconnect position for 0 megawatts. And they're looking at us like, how are we, like, why even go through the study? It's like, we have to have a third point of interconnection into your substation, but based on the power redundancy we need for AI, we're moving forward for a 0 megawatt interconnect position, which is not really something that we've done a lot in the past. Also, I mentioned the Visa, MasterCard, I was using them as examples. They need 5 nines of uptime, so you're 99.59. Your AI and HPC, we're at an inflection point right now where 6 months ago, everybody wanted full backup, 72 hours recips, they wanted 6-hour battery storage solution, they wanted 3 power redundancy. The AI and HPC is somewhere in between your full uptime data center and your Bitcoin mining. And there's no perfect mold. So I guess to answer Tom's question, there's not a single model that we can model in the grid when we say we have an AI HPC data center that we want to interconnect at this facility. It has to be a bipartisan and a open dialogue for how we can optimize those assets at those locations, because it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all. And I'll use another example. Some of the retired coal plants that we're looking at purchasing, they have existing recips, arrows, turbines at those facilities. One of the sites, we had a tough time modeling, and someone mentioned it earlier about the PJM capacity queue. If we don't have a 1-year look ahead, and we know what it's going to take to clean up a site, it's very hard for us to financially model what we're going to get out of those generation assets that's going to support the data center, but we're also going to put the interconnection queue in PJM when we don't have a 1-year look ahead. So I would like to see a much longer forecast on some of the capacity and some of the generation models that we can have as we're looking to build these assets. And then again, just how we interconnect, not on a single line for data centers, but these 0 megawatt interconnects on flexibility that's not going to be 100% uptime, that we can derate, we can have a little more flexibility. We're not going to be turning off these data centers, but is there a potential that we can load forecast workloads on the servers with our customers to save those workloads for nighttime when the energy is not as stressed, when the grid's not as stressed? Absolutely. But I don't think those conversations are really taking place in depth at this time.
And that's what we're trying to accomplish here with organizations such as ourselves. Is there's a lot of great work being done in energy organizations, there's tech organizations, but oftentimes you see, obviously we have an election coming up in 2 weeks, in case anyone hasn't been tracking, and no matter who wins in 2 weeks, this is going to be a top of focus. This past summer alone, this democratically controlled Senate held a hearing on this issue, Republican-controlled House held a hearing on this issue. So we're of the mind that no matter who wins in a couple weeks, this conversation is only going to grow. And if you watch any of those hearings, it always felt like something was missing. You either had energy or power providers, utilities, you name it, kind of speaking to, and maybe you had tech companies speaking in separate rooms or separate conversations. And obviously there's good work being done on the ground and kind of more siloed or independent conversations. But what we're trying to do at the Digital Energy Council and with members such as these all, is kind of get some of these conversations up to the forefront. Start talking about these now on the front end, as opposed to trying to fly the plane and build it at the same time. 10 years from now, we look back and go, oh geez, what happened? So as we have these conversations, and we've talked about hyperscalers, et cetera, is keep kind of nuance some of these technologies out, nuance some of these, as technology grows, it's only going to become more efficient, and different, different data centers bring different opportunities to regions and things like that. And Andrew, I don't know if you want to piggyback on what they're saying about how things are working locally or how you're working on them, and then also, I think to that point, Sean touched on the demand response component to some of these data centers can really fit in. I know NERC's forward-looking 2024 reliability assessment mentioned looking into evolving demand-side management programs. Here's another opportunity where different sized data centers could fit into this.
Yeah, so again, our company name is Digital Power Optimization. We did start in the Bitcoin mining space using it as an energy arbitrage tool. Again, we think of that as energy management infrastructure. People keep calling it Bitcoin mining. I don't think it should be called Bitcoin mining. I think it should be called energy management infrastructure. So again, from the standpoint of the ability to turn it on and off, the ability to ramp it up and ramp it back down. It's a perfect tool for energy companies to use for their own purposes and their own benefit, if only they understood it a little better. And that's where we come in. We try to help, make the case that for the vast majority of the energy companies we talk with, there are spaces in their portfolio where you could put some of this and instantly make them more money. So, contrary to what most people that interact with the power sector want, right? They go to the energy companies of the world and they say, I want to buy your product and I'd like to pay you as little as possible, please. That's what everybody says to an energy company. Why else would you talk to an energy company? Well, I think there's a way to make energy companies more profitable by deploying these in a more thoughtful way, and again, making use of that stranded power where you don't need 5 nines of uptime. You can turn it off. If the wind stops blowing, you shrug and say, all right, well, I'll restart my machines when the wind picks up again. So that flexibility inherent in Bitcoin mining is something that doesn't exist today in AI or high-performance computing. Part of the reason there isn't a technological hurdle. Like, you can interrupt an AI training program. The challenge is you've spent billions of dollars on this facility and all of the equipment that goes in it. Every minute that it sits idle is a minute that you're not earning a return on your capital. So they don't care if the power price goes to $5,000. They're still going to run because it earns them more money by running during that increment than turning off. A Bitcoin miner is going to turn off. So these things fit differently in different places on different assets when you have different motives. But that's the whole point, is you can tailor a structured solution around these different computing types that need different things to work and solve a lot of problems that exist today. So again, not necessarily building something new, just saying that thing you've got, let's use it better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If I
Go
could
for it.
add to that, I know this is kind of one of the topics you wanted to address, but one thing that we're heavily looking at across the U.S., you have different load pockets. You have a lot of renewable projects that are hurting. My last job at Siemens, I headed up the sales team for North America for Siemens Gamesa, and we had a lot of projects that died just due to curtailment. When we look at certain areas, to Andrew's point, like Bitcoin's, it's a hedge. In Montana right now, on the private side, that site that we have there, it's literally, we have a daily calculation of what the strike price of a miner is for Bitcoin. If the energy price is above that, we dump the power to the grid. If the energy price is below that, we mine Bitcoin. So for the renewable projects, we're talking to a lot of IPPs, so independent power producers, that have struggling wind projects. And the way that we've structured this is, okay, you got 10% curtailment. We'll take that energy for free. They'll give us the energy for free, and we'll do a hash split on that energy. And then on top of that, whenever it's below that strike price, which we can upside the megawatts that they're producing because they're making more money going to a Bitcoin miner versus the grid. We have one site right now, the Bitcoin is only energized 50% of the year on a 10 megawatt block, and it's a $4.5 million uplift to that wind project owner. So when you scale that, we're talking serious dollars. And again, it's monetizing energy for Bitcoin, but most importantly, making the best use of the energy that those projects are producing.
Scott, you want to add something?
Yeah, and the other thing I want to make sure that I've been around data centers all my life, and to go take a tour of a data center is difficult. We invite people to come out and see CleanSpark and different places and tour to understand what Bitcoin miners are doing. We've toured people through our immersion sites. They're like, we hear Bitcoin's loud. You go to an immersion site and you can sit here and talk just like we are, right? We have one in Norcross, Georgia, right? People go there. I've taken senators there. And they're like, we didn't know we didn't understand this. We take them out to Sandersville and see the infrastructure and what we've done to the town and that. So please, I think a lot of people don't understand what we're doing. Please reach out. If there's, the utilities are learning that, right? And that's where I'm getting the calls in the South now. Can you come to this town? We have 10 megawatts. Can you come here? Because exactly like I say, there's pockets out there they're not using. So, I put it out there we need to educate more. I told Margot, who's with me today, that we just hired Margot. It's incredible on the Hill here. And that's where I was this morning on some meetings early. But we're always there if anybody's interested.
Well, in our last, we have 10 minutes or so here. I guess it's worth, as mentioned, we have regulators, stakeholders, policymakers, et cetera in this room. How do you see, the hyperscaler and the large-scale data centers take up a lot of the oxygen, but do you see any sort of ways to, this might be another loaded question, maybe incentivize some of these builds in certain regions, or how would you guys, if you're going up to the Hill or going up, in front of regulators, or what would be your ask or your pitch, or kind of what's top of mind right now for your particular industry, your company, I should say?
It's a good question. Look, I think our view as a company, again, the nature of what we do and how we do it, is to try to find the pathway forward without needing to change regulations or without needing to modify someone's opinion or approvals or the regulatory overlay. Because, again, that adds time. And we all know that, the energy sector is a heavily regulated industry, and therefore it, in many ways, moves just slower than others might. And that's, by necessity, I think. There are things that you can cause major missteps in this industry that you might not cause in others, and therefore you have to be pretty careful about what you're doing and how you're doing it. But yeah, I would say, the flexibility of thinking, and you hear other speakers today talk about, all of the above approach to solving this problem. Nuclear is great. We're big fans of nuclear. I think that takes time. I think, we asked the question in our monthly update email just the other day of our followers and said, in what year do you think 25% of newly built data centers will be powered primarily by nuclear energy? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm guessing it's further out than a lot of people would like. So again, in the meanwhile, you've got to figure out these interim solutions. And I think just familiarizing yourselves and those that are in a decision-making capacity with what this technology is and how it works, the differences between AI, the differences between AI training and inferencing, what that means for latency and how fiber is run around this country. There's just a lot of different pieces that play into it. It goes all the way down into water consumption, water availability, county by county or state by state. Deregulated states versus regulated states. If you're doing a development project in a regulated state as a renewable developer, there's not that much I can do to help them because, again, there's a limit to what they can do in those markets. So I think hopefully there's a willingness to consider alternatives, even if they might not have been something we've done in the past, because, again, I think there's going to be a significant need for change. I don't know what that looks like. I don't think I have the answers to tell the energy sector, hey, here's the 8 different things you should do to fix this problem. If anybody does know that, I'm sure everyone in the room would love to hear it, but it's harder, as we all know, than we would like it to be. So I think applying the technologies that exist in the places where you can apply them today, let's do that, in addition to planning for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I'll just add to that and throw out some numbers, and hopefully I don't lose everybody on these. But so right now in the U.S., you got 15 gigs of data centers, gigawatts. Again, we got a big inflection point in 2 weeks, but still, I don't think that's really going to change the growth that you're going to see in the data center space. Depending on who you ask, it's a 10% load growth till 2030. There's upwards going to be 35 gigawatts of data centers built in the U.S. and operating by 2030. 50% of global data centers will be in the U.S. by 2030. You can look at a bunch of different news media, a bunch of different articles. They all kind of align. It's kind of the medium range of where you'll see this. Now that coupled with 25% of our grid is over 50 years old, which if anybody's in the transmission business, which I was for Siemens, most of the transmission equipment's built the last 35 years. So that means 25% of the US grid is past its design life. You have this massive growing AI infrastructure and HPC, data centers, Bitcoin, flexible loads. That coupled with the renewables coming online, it's a dynamic, non-dispatchable resource. There is no one answer, and I know I said this previously, but our lobbyist for TeraWulf is not here right now. I wanted to come to this meeting. I'm the one having to build this infrastructure, and getting this stuff permitted and getting the policy pushed forward is so critical for what we're trying to do. That's why I was very, very happy to come here and speak on this panel. So there's no right answer. I would love to talk to anybody, continue these conversations, but it's education, understanding each other's business, understanding each other's hurdles, and getting this infrastructure to be built, because it's coming, and we need to figure out a way to handle it.
Agreed 100% on exactly what you said, and I think the one thing you said is education. Mostly when you talk AI, people get, I don't think, we talked about this, we raised a hand, who knows really what AI is, as you explained, I think, very well. Bitcoin, I think people really get scared because it has a bad rap. Please understand it, know it, I'll be 60 this year, and if 5 years ago you could say you're building some of the biggest in Bitcoin and becoming one of the largest companies, I would have laughed at someone. And now we're doing it. It's not rocket science, but it does help a lot, like we've all said. It helps a lot, so please educate yourself. Please, we'll show you what it does. It's the greatest business in the world, and I've been in a lot of them.
And then in our last minute or two, I guess let's ask a quick kind of high-level question in terms of, any new technology moves at the speed of light. However many years ago you'd think you have a computer in your pocket. We do now. But as all these technologies grow, become more efficient, et cetera, are there any efficiency stories you're hearing out on the field, kind of using energy in a more efficient way? Obviously, we've touched on some of those, but the hardware, chips, inputs, outputs, whatever it might be.
Look, I'll say this. A lot of the GPUs that NVIDIA is selling today, they don't actually operate 24/7. And we talk about 5 nines of uptime. That's the availability of that uptime, but it doesn't mean they're being used that much. And so these companies are spending billions upon billions of dollars to build out these facilities, fill them up with computers, and then they sit there and don't do anything for 30, 40% of the year, which is just about the most insane inefficiency that I can possibly come up with today. No kidding. If you can figure out a bigger inefficiency in the market today, let me know, because I don't know where it is. The guy that person that solves that problem is going to be a trillionaire. No kidding, because that is just an absolutely massive amount of capacity waste, infrastructure waste, capital waste, and that's got to get solved. So the idea of using, if you've got the connection, if you've got that power availability, make sure you're actually using it, and that'll help prevent the need to build quite so much if you're using the things that you're building today more fully and completely.
Yeah, I'm going to build on that point. That is the most valid statement, because if you watch some of these GPUs, they'll be sitting there at like a 30% and then just ramp up to 100. So again, understanding those loads, I think, is something we got to talk about. But for an energy efficiency, we're getting much more efficient. Like our PUEs are 1.1 versus a data center was 1.4 to 1.8 5 years ago. But to Andrew's point, there's some cool technologies out there. So as you have GPUs that are being underutilized, there's actually now platforms you can do AI, HPC, and Bitcoin on the same GPU. So you actually have your utilization, your base load GPU or AI of your cloud computing, and that leftover non-utilized compute you can actually utilize for other resources like Bitcoin mining. So that is one way to help not have the energy profile with the utilities go completely haywire, to kind of levelize that a little bit so you're not going 2 megawatts to 100 megawatts in a fraction of a couple of seconds. So I think from an energy infrastructure perspective, the utilization of these assets is going to allow you to bank these projects better, and it's going to allow just better load flow studies, better interaction with the people we're pulling the power from.
I agree with both of you, and as I say, we just focus on Bitcoin mining. So I tell a story about Dalton Utilities in Dalton, Georgia, right? A small utility. We know the weather's getting cold. We can shut our mine down in minutes. That we came from the software business. We know before when they need it. They only need it from 7 in the morning till 9, and then they might need it in the afternoon in the summers. We know when that is. We shut it down for them. They don't have to go fire a peaker plant that costs millions of dollars to start up. They call us, and it works, right? And they'll talk about it. They're very advanced, one of the more advanced utilities that I work with. And it was a joy for them to come in, and we worked there. We have now 4 data centers there, and looking at more in a small, little rural community. And there's a lot of give and take, which people don't understand what we do with that. So it's been a pleasure, guys.
Yeah. And so thanks, everyone. I think if there's one takeaway from this is as I mentioned earlier, kind of the energy runs technology development. So kind of where we look at this is kind of the technology needs of tomorrow with the energy realities of today, and we have to get together and start solving some of these problems on the front end instead of just talking about it. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Let's take a picture up here. Guys, it was great. If I can ask you, let's take a picture up here. Okay. Here.